Okay, today I'd like to introduce Peter Vidos, who is the founder of Vizzu, an open source set of tools for creating animated data visualizations and stories. His primary focus is understanding how Vizzu's innovative approach to data visualization can be put to good use. He has a passion for helping address the challenges of building and presenting visualizations and figuring out how to help data professionals utilize the power of animation in data viz. He's been involved with several things in the past 15 years. Earlier projects he's worked on involve mobile apps, online analytics, data visualization, decision support, and e-learning, and educational administration and social activities. He's still building a selfie teleport just for fun, and he likes to boast about that little side project as well. So please help me welcome Peter Vidos, who's going to be giving our presentation today.
Thank you very much for the warm welcome, Ron, and also Ricardo. It looks like there are already some comments. Yeah, like Oscar sent me something about liking my glasses, but that's not that relevant, I guess. Yeah, and Derek asked, what does Vizzu mean? And it means, so basically, Vizzu is a short for visualization in Hungarian, where and I'm from Hungary. I'm actually in Hungary right now, so it's 6 p.m. where I am from. And Jojan let us know that his cat is called Peter. So it looks like we're going to have some fun with everybody being involved. So first of all, the way I like to do this kind of presentations is I give you a general introduction about what we do, about the company, about this whole animated approach to data visualization, and then I would go and show you a couple of examples like Jupyter notebooks with Vizzu in them, and I try to just walk you through how the API is working. And also towards the end, I would like to show you a couple of other applications that we built for a technology. The way I'm going to share my screen and keep talking to my screen for most of the time in a way that I won't be even able to see you. So if you have any questions, just unmute yourself and let me know, or if you type it in the comments, then I would like to ask Ron and Ricardo to let me know that there's a question there, and but feel free to interrupt at any time. And yeah, if there are no further questions, maybe it's better if we keep the questions to the Vizzu thing and not about Hungary and other stuff. I guess that would work better for me right now. So without further ado, let me just yeah, give you start with the intro. So what we did, we basically built a generic chart morpher. So we have a new approach to data visualization. Yeah, it seems to have issues all the time. So I'm just going to switch to a different version of screen sharing via Zoom. Okay, so we built a generic chart morpher, meaning that we built an engine that can generate all different types of charts using a single logic. And because of that, it can interpolate between the charts that are expressed on its interface. And yeah, it still doesn't work the way I want it. Hopefully this is not going to persist. And so because of this, as I said, it can interpolate between every chart that is expressed on its interface. So we have this generic engine, and that's the core of everything we do. I mean, the next obvious question, like, why the hell would you want to build such a thing? Because we have a vision that we can build with this technology, we can build a graphical user interface for data. So we could help general people, like business professionals, not like you guys, data experts, but without this kind of expertise, help them explore data visually, tell animated, compelling, easy to understand stories, and also use this to create dashboards and later on for forecasting and other things. So this is the long-term vision that we're working towards. And right now we're at the point where we have the engine and it works pretty well. And but now we want to just like we started exploring the opportunities that this new approach brings to data visualization, because obviously nobody else has such a technology out there. And we thought that since we're an early stage startup and we didn't have the resources to build a fully fledged end user tool, so we thought first we build APIs around the engine that would enable professionals who can code to start utilizing this technology. And at first we built a JavaScript engine and released it as an open source JavaScript library. And then next up, we created a Python API and basically enabled people using Jupyter Notebook to use it in notebooks and stuff. And so, you know, the second logical question is, why does animation matter? Why is it good that it's animated? And there are a couple of answers to that. I think the most straightforward is that static charts are abstract, and whenever you show views of the same data set with static charts, your audience have to make the connection between these charts within their heads, and they have to understand these relationships between the views one by one. So, for example, we're looking at charts based on the same data set, but for someone who's not as experienced as yourself, it can be quite challenging to understand what exactly are we looking at. But if I connect these views via animation, then it becomes pretty straightforward. I think you might have some issues with the security settings, Ron. So someone just wrote on the screen, "I like cheese," and you maybe don't want to let anybody in the call interrupt with or interact with the views. That might have been the issue with the purple and the black screens beforehand. So we might have a troll among our ranks, I guess. So that's like this sort of intuitiveness, connecting the views can be, we think, very important when you want to communicate your insights. For example, just like Ricardo said about the example that you're working on together within the meetup group. I'll try to reshare my screen once again. And a couple of examples for good animated transitions is like when you want to drill down, for example, and see the components of a composite index and just zoom in, see like the difference from one component to the other, things like that. It becomes so natural. It's because our brains are wired in a way that to identify movement and to understand its meaning is much, much easier for us than to do this abstract thing. Sorry, Ron, you just disabled screen sharing for me as well. So if you can enable that
Yeah, sorry, that was my
just
fault.
for me,
Adjust
you can make me a co-host. That could be the way around this or something like that.
I've re-enabled it.
Looks like now I have the opportunity to do this once again. All right, so it also works very well if you want to zoom in, for example, on a stack chart and show how different components are working, and if there's one that like goes against the trend, like in this case, and things like that. I'm so sorry about all the technical difficulties, guys. This is not the first time I'm doing my presentation over Zoom and never had these kind of issues. Okay, so switching between aggregate and distributed view is also a very straightforward example. Just like Ricardo said, and that's one of the examples where animation can be very useful, is when you want to show change over time. So I'm pretty sure all of you are familiar with the racing bar charts. They've been very popular a couple of years ago. They are still a very good tool to show this kind of trends and changes, and it actually is fascinating to see how, in this case, revenue generated by different music formats in the US are competing with one another. With Vizzu, you also have Tom still writes on my screen, so I guess it's still not the best way we set this up. So as you can see, we have some other views, not just the traditional racing bar chart. Because of the flexibility of the Vizzu engine, we can change in various ways what we're looking at. So yeah, and you can turn one chart into a real story. Like for example, this is the amount of money different mobile phone providers built, like generated over time, and we added the yeah. So as you can see, there are different leagues in terms of revenue, and this one chart is great at illustrating the difference between those. So I'm just going to reshare my screen so that we don't have the I like cheese thing back there. If you can stop this somehow, Ron, I would really appreciate that. So this is the story. We built a core engine that's actually in C++. We're using WebAssembly to compile it in the browser. Then we released the JavaScript library back in September 2021. The first product for Python was IPyVizzu. I'm going to show how it works. That's enabled people to build animated charts within Jupyter notebooks and similar platforms. That was released in in March 2022. And then the fourth is IPyVizzu Story. It's a presentation tool that we released roughly a year ago. And so we have a ton of integrations for all this. I think most exciting ones, apart from all the different notebooks that are out there, are Panel and Streamlit. I would also show you an example of how to build, because it opens up new use cases, such as the ability to build interactive dashboards and reports within notebook, so within these platforms. Okay, without further ado, let's code. If you want to follow along and take a look at all the examples that I'm going to show, just go to bit.ly/Vizzu_in_Orlando. You will end up at this repository. I hope you're still, yeah, I think I shared my whole screen. You're looking at my browser, right?
Yes.
Anyone? Okay, yes. Cool. So you will end up at this repo folder, and there's like a friendly welcome message, a ton of useful links there. And if you go to the notebooks folder, you will basically see all the notebooks that I'm just going to show you. And we're going to go through from 1 to 3. And there are these playground notebooks that I put up there. They use data sets that are also in this folder, and they are specifically built for you to just get a sense of how Vizzu and IPyVizzu works, and just play around and understand the logic of it. Because since it's a generic chart creator, it has a specific logic that you need to understand at first. We are working towards making it very accessible and straightforward to use for everyone, but still there's some work to be done there. I'm not sure how I can just hide these comments on screen. Do you also see it?
We are seeing it. I think I think that was due to the whiteboard being enabled, and it's disabled now.
Okay, then I'm just going to reshare my screen once again, and we see what happens. I'm pretty sure this person will add other comments just like he did before, or she. Okay, so let's start with the basic introduction. IPyVizzu has a very simple basic logic. It has one method called the animate method, and if you call it once, you will end up having a static chart. If you call it again with a different combination, with a different configuration, then you will just morph the initial chart to the new one. It has 3 arguments: data, configuration, and style, and an optional one called animate options, via which you can configure how the animation happens. With data, you add or manipulate the data that is on the chart. With the config, you set the chart, how they look, how they feel, how they what kind of chart you're working with, and the styling is obviously the styling element. So let's start with a very simple example. We use actually pip, but you can also use conda to install it. You just need to install IPyVizzu, and you're good to go. And here, so this is a vanilla Jupyter notebook. I'm just using like a CSS hack to view the output next to the code cell in order to make this kind of presentation easier to follow. So what we do here is that we import pandas because we're working with pandas data frame very nicely. And from IPyVizu, we import the chart and these arguments. And then we are going to just use the Titanic data frame, Titanic data, and add it to the data frame by reading the CSV. We actually added one extra column called the count, that is like one per each volume, per each passenger. And we also specifically tell pandas, and then via that IPyVizu, that P class is a string. Otherwise, it would think it's a value, and that would make things more complicated. We would see charts that we don't want to see. We're actually having right now two types of data. So we have categories and values, and usually IPyVizu automatically like recognizes which column is what, but in this case you need to specifically tell that it's a category by setting the d type to string. Okay, so first we go, and then you just create the data object and call the data frame method and just add the data frame to it, and that's it. And next we're going to create an empty Vizzu chart with creating this chart object. The width is 100% and the height is 360 pixels. Sometimes you need to add additional properties depending on the notebook that you're using. If you go to ipyvizzu.com, so that's you're going to, it's a little longer here, but it basically redirects this page, so the documentation site. You will see what kind of environments we're actually supporting. So if you click on environments, you will see the notebooks, different app platforms, BI tools, IDEs, whatever. And then you can see at which notebook, what kind of features we support and we don't, and how you should actually. So for example, in Colab, you have to add this when you create the chart in order to make it work. But in Jupyter Notebook, it's as simple as this. And the first chart we're going to build, we will add the data just by adding the data object that we created beforehand. And in the configuration, we will add the count, so this value that is 1 for every passenger on the x-axis, and then the sex of the passengers to the y-axis. We are going to add the same number that's on the x-axis to the label, and then we just add a title to the chart. And usually with a live audience, I try to ask like what kind of chart we're going to end up with, but in online, I'm just going to show it to you. So it's going to be a bar chart, because on the x-axis there is a value, on the y-axis there is a category. Actually, yeah, we also added the label on the markers, and that's what we have. And next up, what we do is we're going to add another category, the survived, whether the passenger survived or died, on the x-axis and also on the color. And if I run this cell, we're going to have a stacked bar chart. Notice that we didn't have to do anything with the y-axis, so that setting got preserved, the same as the title. That's the logic IPyVizu employs, so it only changes the parameters of the chart that you specifically change. You don't have to over and over describe the whole configuration of the chart, just the part that you're actually altering. And so we have a couple of X's, we have channels like label and color, and you can add the categories and values to them. I will talk about it in more detail. And also the legend automatically appeared next to the chart without you having to do anything about it. Okay, and so in this third and final cell, I will just, I will just turn the geometric elements to circles. So yeah, let's go back. I mean, let's start again so that you understand the transformation. So we had the bar chart initially, then we turned it into a stack bar chart by adding the survived on the color and on the X. And here it's basically the same thing, so nothing changed. This is actually not, oh no, sorry. There is something that changes here, and let's do that first. This should be empty. So we are going to, as you can see, the survived is now on the x-axis, and I'm going to put it on the y-axis, and remove it from the x-axis. So what is going to happen is that we're going to have, yeah, just this category, the diet category, also on the y-axis. We basically grouped the stack chart like this. And as I said, we have other options to change. I'm just going to change the geometry to circle and rerun the cell. Now, instead of rectangles, we have circles representing the data. Since they have a size, other than, so rectangles don't have a size opportunity, but circles can. We can add the same value count to the size, and then as you see. The circles have different size, and I can also turn the coordinate system to polar instead of Euclidean. That's the default value, and end up with a chart that no one understands. So because of the generic logic, this is really important. You can build charts with Vizzu that are, even though they match all the criteria that a chart should, since they are very uncommon, people would have a lot of difficulties in understanding, like this one. This is something to keep in mind when you're playing with it. But basically, the config part is what this tried to introduce. It's really like very generic, just like the whole engine, and straightforward. We have the x and the y-axis, and then we have channels, the color, the label, the size. These are the ones that I already showed you how they work, and we also have lightness. And so this is, you can add any number of categories and one values to each of these axes and channels. So as you can imagine, there are a ton of different possibilities. And there are other parameters like the geometry, which changes the geometric elements. Rectangle is the default value, but we changed it to circle now, but we also have area and line. The coordinate system, Cartesian or Euclidean, is the default value, because you can switch it to polar. You can turn on sorting by value. You can change the alignment, the title, and there are also some other options. So that's like the basic intro. And this is the version that we released back in March 2021. No, sorry, 2022. Yeah. And so actually, we got a ton of comments from data scientists who started using it. One of those was that it's really hard for them, this generic logic is hard for them to understand. And also the fact that if I rerun this cell, for example, I'm not going to end up with the same chart that I had before, is like puzzling and hard to follow. This was the two main challenges that we were faced with. Sorry, the other one was that people are not used to using generic chart creators. Every other chart library that you're using works in a way that you basically preset the chart that you want to build. So you say, like, I want a scatter plot, I want a bar chart, I want a pie chart, whatever, and then you fill in the blanks. So you add the parameters of that chart. And figuring out that actually a pie chart is a stacked single bar chart in the polar geometry is just not the way people approach this at all. So in order to help people use it and address this issue, we created preset charts, meaning that you have the option now, after we release this in IPyVizzu, to create, for example, a stacked column chart in the way that you actually, in the configuration part, you specifically say that it's going to be a stacked column chart. It has also X and Y. We help you set that X is a category and Y is a value, but with column charts, it's not that hard to imagine. And you just add the stacked by. So we added a stacked by parameter, which makes it easier for you to just know like what's going to happen if you stack it by a certain category. And on our documentation site, you have a lot of examples, and as you saw, you can have like this is a bubble plot, which has actually two values on the axis and another on color, and then another that divides them up. But basically, you have an example that works there, and you have a sample code, and you can even, if you open this up, you can just copy and paste this into your notebook and have the same chart there in order to figure out how it works. Let me give you a more specific example of how you can use preset charts. and also something about the styling. We're going to use a different data set here. That's actually the one with that was behind the racing bar chart that I showed you before. So it shows how much revenue different music formats generated in the US from 1973 up to 2020. And as you can see in Vizzu, it makes a lot of sense to add data frames to it that are ordered from oldest to newest if there's a time component, since we don't have temporal data right now, so Vizzu doesn't know that it needs to be ordered, so you should do that in Pandas. And also it makes a ton of sense to include all the categories already from the beginning, even if you add a zero value to there, so that you can have a chance to understand, and Vizzu has a chance to understand the order of the, like for example, when you have a stacked chart, in what order should these colored stacked parts should be put on one another. DVD will be closest to the x-axis in this case. And yeah, so again, we're going to create an empty chart. Since I'm calling the animate method already with just the data in it, it actually creates an empty chart here. And then we will just create a bar chart by calling the config bar method with revenue on the x-axis and the format on the y-axis. And voila, we have a bar chart with the total revenue of the different formats. Also, please note that that actually Vizzu automatically summarizes the values in the revenue column without you having to tell it. That's the only available option right now, and it does it all the time. So you have to be aware of that too. We are going to release new new aggregators very soon. They are already in testing, via which you can also similarly easily just show the average of these values, for example, or the minimum, the maximum, and the count and things like that. But so far in the production version that is available, it automatically just summarizes the values that's in one of these value columns. Now I like how this looks, but I mean, I like that it works, but I don't like the way it looks. So first of all, I'm going to just change it to a grouped bar chart, and this will change the coloring because in a group bar chart, every group has to have a different color. Now it's a lot nicer, but I still have issues with these long numbers that are written there and other things. And this is where styling comes into place. So this is just an example of a style object that we create here. For example, I changed the font family to Arial. I changed the font size of the title. I changed the background color of the plot. And I add a new color palette because I don't like these default colors so much. And yeah, I'm just going to change a lot of other things. Because in order to make it work better, and you can also have you have the opportunity to understand how our styling logic works also on our documentation side. It uses something similar to a CSS, so it has a hierarchical logic. I changed the font family on the top level. It's going to change all the font on every element. As you can see here is the x-axis label number scale, so it's already in the and it's within the plot part, so it's already on the fourth level. And I'm just going to change the number scale to have short scale symbol US, and you see everything. So a lot of things changed at once, like the colors are different, the numbers are looking better, and yeah, so it's a lot sleeker, I'd say. And as you can see, for example, changing the font size, it is also done animatedly. So if you change anything about the style, usually we animate that too. Okay, now let's use another preset that is a bubble chart. We need to add something to the size in this case. And now, so it's a lot easier, as you can see. It's pretty straightforward what's going to happen and what is the chart that I'm going to end up with. So it's also just basically easier to understand what's going on here. Then let's turn this into a stacked bubble chart by stacking the whole thing by year. And so we now have a lot of smaller bubbles in the place of the big one. We can turn this into a stream graph fairly easily. As you can see, we can change the styling right within one animate method, even if we're using presets. So it's fairly easy. The reason why we did it is because we wanted the labels here on the x-axis to be more like this in order to make space and overlap less, but it still doesn't look so well. And now we're going to use these events that we have. We have a lot of events with which you can fine tune the look and feel of your chart. They are written in JavaScript. Sorry for that. And it all only and this part says that only the years that are divisible by 5 should be written there. So I run this cell, and if I just move my mouse over in order for the chart to re-render, those are the only numbers that stay on the chart. As you can see, we also have the tooltip. So if you move your mouse over the chart, you can see what the value on that specific element is and what are the categories. Still, the number formatting should be also the same as on the chart. That's something we need to work on. But as I said, we're an early stage startup, so we try to keep improving. And that's one thing I can tell you, that if you have any suggestions in how to improve this, I'm all ears, and we're happy to receive these suggestions from you anytime. Okay, another nifty feature of our library is the splitting feature that you can just turn on in case of stacked chart in the configuration. This will just animate the chart to this state where you can see the components side by side. It's so much easier to identify trends and see them in parallel when you're looking at a chart like this. And then third and an important addition is how you can filter the data object. We have the filter method there, where in a JavaScript expression, you have to just say like which are the type of data that you want in the chart to remain. So right now we want only the elements where the format is either vinyl or streaming. And basically, this is a zooming feature, so that's why it's so important. We're going to just zoom in on vinyl and streaming. And again, for the audience, it's like super easy to understand what's going on. So next up, I'm just going to switch off the filtering and also the splitting. This is the stage that my wife calls when the elephants kiss. Now you know why. And yeah, I can also turn this into a line chart fairly easily for people to make comparisons in, which format was the most generated the most revenues over time, for example, in certain years. Okay, so that was the introduction of Vizzu, the basic thing that's behind all this. I think it might be worth to take a little break and for questions, and then we're going to move on to Vizzu's story, that is the presentation use case or presentation extension of Vizzu that we created, and I'm going to show you that too. I'm just going to look at the chat window. You can, I would welcome you to add new questions in the chat if you have anything.
It looks like Ricardo's got his hand raised for a.
Oh, okay. Please, then
go ahead,
Ricardo. Please unmute yourself and let me know.
Okay.
I'm just going to stop sharing until then, in order to.
Yeah, because it was kind of disabled the chat and the.
Oh yeah, it's also disabled.
I know you did it. So
checking a bunch of security things.
So we could close the cheesy part. Yeah. Yeah. All right. So I noticed a couple of things, Peter. First of all, in that example of the of the video, the CDs, and the revenue, do you require your data set to be in the long format for these charts, or they could be in a wider format?
Long format and the wide format? Sorry, I'm not entirely sure what you mean.
I'll explain. For example, in your data set, you have the years, you have the content, right? The format of content, and then you have the revenues. Okay.
Yeah.
We call that in the data set, we call it long format. Okay. Mm-hmm. Usually, if you come from Excel, okay, usually you are used to a wide format. So in other words, you still have the year, but the year is going to be spread between all those contents, and then the revenue is going to be within the year.
Yeah. We need a long format.
Okay, so that's the first thing that I noticed. Yes, in other packages, they tell you, right, your data should be in long format. So that's the first. And then the other one is the philosophy of the construction of the chart. Do you follow what is called the grammar of graphics? For this.
Yeah, I guess so. Like grammar of graphics is like there are two of those, and then so basically, I mean, the short answer is yes, we do. We built this without actually specifically following it, but when we figured out that this exists and checked it, basically everything checks. Right now we're actually working on a grammar of animation as like a next level of such thing, because that's what we are exploring in our journey. But yeah, we do try to set all the defaults in the way that it fits, so that it's easy to understand for everyone what we see on the screen, and we obviously try to follow, the what I would say the historic.
Yeah, it's just kind of a confirmation of what I'm seeing. Okay.
Yeah.
Because for example, you are saying in the chart, apart from the style, right? That you are introducing, you're saying, okay, so, I want these variables, which is kind of the aesthetics, right? Then you have the geometry, then you have the styling, then you have the title. So it kind of, follows that pattern. For example, I have a background in, for example, in R, and in R you use a package called ggplot2, and ggplot2 is based on that. Okay, so that's what I'm trying to, reconcile here.
Yeah, absolutely. So because of the generic nature of our logic and of our package, we do basically came to the same conclusion as Mr. Wiggins with his approach. So that, but we have a more generic approach even, because we had to build an engine that can generate all these different types of charts, and actually these rules, for example, like where you put the labels on the markers, they change depending on what kind of geometric elements you're using, and things like that. So there are a ton of different, and if it's a stack chart or not. So we actually think a lot about these rules and try to even simplify them further and understand what works best. You always have the opportunity as a user of IPyVizzu to just overwrite these settings and even the animation settings that we also give a lot of thought into, like making it in a way that it's easy to follow. You can, believe me, you can make animations that are just will confuse the viewer more than explain anything. And that's part of our research and part of our process to try and understand and simplify these logics and create this grammar of animation as well. All right, thank you, Ricardo.
Thank you.
Then we can also do the Q&A, or this mid-session Q&A in like the same way as Ricardo asked the question. If any of you have further questions, I'm happy to answer it right now, or if not, then I'm just going to continue with IPyVizzu story. I still believe you can use you can unmute yourself at least. All right, let's get back to the presentation then. So I need to just hide this thing here. All right, third example is IPyVizzu story. So that was the other comment we got from data scientists who started using our tool, is that this whole one-directional use, so that and not clear what's going to happen if I rerun this cell that's more towards the upper side, and how can I really use this for sharing my insights, brought us to build an extension that basically enables you to create, present, and share animated presentations right from your notebook. And the way it works is that it introduces two new phenomena. One is called a slide, and the other is a step. A slide is basically like a phase where we stop in an animated presentation. It can include one step or more than one steps, and a step is just a phase in this animation. So in this graphic, the second slide has only one step, the fourth slide has only one step, whereas the third slide has multiple steps. And when we animate from the second slide to the third slide, we're going to go from the second slide through the second step, and stop at the third slide. So that's about it. And we have basically and the step is basically the same thing as a chart was in the IPyVizzu. So it's really easy to start using IPyVizzu Story once you learned how IPyVizzu works. You have almost the same opportunities. You have the opportunity to add data, but you have to add the whole data set right in the beginning. In IPyVizzu, you have the opportunity to add like new columns, new rows, whatever, in each and every step. In IPyVizzu Story, you have to add the whole data set right at the beginning, but you also have the opportunity to filter, just like I did when we zoomed in at the streaming and the vinyl. So it's okay. You can basically show whichever part of your data you want to at each step. You have the configuration and the style, and based on this graphic, you don't have the animation options that you had in IPyVizzu. It's because this graphic is outdated. You do now have the animation options in IPyVizzu Story because we released that. Okay, the example that I'm using here shows how much money the US federal government spent on different things they call R&D from 1955 up to 2020. Basically, we do the same thing. We import pandas. Here's another. So like we install IPyVizzu Story with pip the same way as IPyVizzu. And now, as you can see, we have story, slide, and step. Story is the topmost element in this hierarchy. It basically includes all your slides and steps, and that's what you play at the end of the day. We just read the data from the CSV. We add it to a data frame. And then first we just create the styling object, the style object here that we're going to just add to the chart. And then we create the story object instead of chart object. We add the data and the style right away. We set the size by the set size method. And then we are going to create our initial slide, which is, it's already run. It's an older version, shouldn't be here, whatever. So in the first slide, as you can see, we only have one step. And we start by filtering the data right away. We don't want the defense function to be involved, so that's why function does not equal defense is what we add to the filter. And we create a stacked area chart. As you can see, we can use the chart presets that I showed in the previous example in a way that year is on the x-axis, amount is on the y-axis, and is stacked by function. And we end up with a stacked area chart without defense among the categories. And then we just add this slide to the story by calling the addSlide method of the story. And we also create another slide where we switch the splitting feature on and change the title a bit. And then we add that to the story, and we switch the tooltip on, and we play the story that we created. So that's about it, and we basically end up with this thing here. Notice the buttons that appear beneath the chart. There's this full screen button right in the top right corner, bottom right corner, and so you can zoom in and have the chart take over the whole screen, which is great for presentation purposes. And you have these buttons, and if I click on the next button, I will just end up with like going to the splitted version that I just set for the second slide. You can see the number of slides and on which slide you're at. And with the help of these buttons, but also with the arrows on your keyboard or with a clicker, you can basically move back and forth between any of the slides that you have, or you can go to the first or the last slide, whatever. It's that easy to and now you have the bidirectional use. You can move within the preset views of the data, and you can use it to present your findings fairly easily. Yeah, just hit escape to get out from the zoomed in version. As you can see, the sizing doesn't automatically adapt to the new window, but that's something we will fix very soon. So I'm going to add yet another handler event to remove, again, the years that are not divisible by 5. This is a rather complex use case, I know, and it's using JavaScript, but we have also some examples up on the site, and we will make this easier. And next up, we are going to add another slide that has more than one step. So first of all, we are going to just create the slide as an empty slide, and then we call the add step method of the slide and add the step object there. So it's the same thing as we had before. We switch off the splitting at first, and then in the second part we switch off the filtering, and because of that the defense will just appear on the chart. So we add the defense budget, and we add this multi-step slide the same way to the story, and we hit story play. I'm going to just go through these parts. As you can see, it's always the first slide that appears initially. We have now the opportunity to start the story on any of the slides that you want. So we added that feature to the Vizzu story tool. Let me just yeah, so basically what we added here, so this was the second slide that we had before. Let me zoom in, and now we are going to switch the splitting feature off, and then also add defense. And now we can see how much the US government spent on defense over the years. That's like a pretty huge amount, I'd say. But notice that two things, adding the defense and then switching the splitting feature off, it happens one after the other. So if I click on again the next button, first the splitting feature turns off and then defense appears. And that's what this multi-step logic, multi-step slide makes possible. And now I'm going to just add another slide where I switch the alignment to stretch, and yet another where switch back the alignment to the bottom, and switch the geometry to rectangle, change the filter to zoom to specific elements. And yeah, I'm going to just do some more things like switching to a grouped column chart. Yeah, let's see what we end up with, right? With all these changes. I think that's what matters really at the end of the day. So we started with the stacked area chart. Then we switched to the splitted view. Then we turned off the splitting and added the defense. This is where the alignment is set to stretch. So as you can see, instead of the values, now we see the percentages, and we just needed to switch the alignment to stretch. This is, I think, quite a nice feature. And then we can see that, yeah, the US federal government spent a lot on defense over the years, even like, yeah, so percentage-wise as well. Now we turned it to a stacked column chart and zoomed in by filtering the data to only include data from the years 1955 and 2020. This is the first and the last year in the data. And now we're going to just switch the chart type to group chart tag, and then rearranged it by switching the order of the categories on the x-axis. And we can see one by one how this value changed over time from the beginning to the very end, like nominally. So that's really, like, as we hope at least, is straightforward to use. You have to understand the logic of it, but you can make nice animated presentations. And by calling this export to HTML method, you actually create an HTML file in the background. It's on my computer somewhere. Yeah, let me see. It should be, I guess, here. Yeah, so it's the all on the meet button. And here I created the My Story HTML, and it's going to open up in the wrong browser, which I will just stop right away. But basically, if I just add this here in the browser that we've been using, it's an HTML file that includes the whole story that I built. It's the same thing that you saw before. So we have the whole animation in an HTML file with the data included, with the JavaScript library in the background that you can just send to anyone, or you can just load it in the browser without the notebook and use it for presentation purposes. So that's IPyVizzu story. It has a separate documentation site. You get there if you go at IPyVizzu story at vizzuhq.com. But if you look for it, or yeah, obviously the link is there in the repo folder that I just shared with you. So here's the repo, and here's the documentation and the examples. We have a ton of examples over there too, and also a ton of examples in the repo folder. As I said, these playground notebooks should make it easier for you to understand and employ your logic. You also have the environments that this thing is available in and how you can use it. You can use it in Python separately from the notebooks as well. And yeah, a lot of other things. So that's the IPyVizzu story product we're having. And I have another like applications and also future examples that I would be happy to show you, but I thought like this might be also a good opportunity to make a short break for Q&A. So speak up and let me know what you think. Let me know if you have any questions.
Okay. Anybody have questions for Peter? No? A few minutes.
That's all right. So let me show you some other stuff that is now available. For example, via our integration with Streamlit, which is partly done by us, partly senior data scientist working within Streamlit. His name is Zachary Blackwood, and we're immensely grateful for him for building the initial component. So this is just very, and you can obviously find the whole thing in GitHub. Everything that I showed you is open source and released under a very permissive MIT license. So you can build it into anything you want. We're always looking for new contributors, new platforms to integrate with. And so this is just a fairly simple example. And the goal was here to make it so that that IPyVizzu charts work within Streamlit in a way that the whole app doesn't get reloaded all the time. This is something that Streamlit by default does. And so Zachary built a new bidirectional, so-called bidirectional component with an element called Vizzu chart, and it enables you to use these interactive elements within Streamlit. So for example, this is a very simple one. It just swaps the orientation of the chart, basically changing the category and the value on which chart they are. If you go to intro /2/vizzu/in.streamlit.app that you can see here, obviously the link is once again in the readme of the repo folder. You can check out all these examples. So how it can be useful, this new use case. So let's take a simple look at, for example, the music data set that we had before. If I switch this slider to any year, we can just go to that year's data, and the views, the changes are highlighted due to the animation that Vizzu provides. We also have, so the bidirectionality of the thing means that we have the opportunity to click on certain elements and then add so like use it as a comment or within the chart. So this is like if I click on any of the elements of this chart, then we are going to just zoom in and see the components of element Z and the title changes. And if I click on anywhere else in the chart, then we go back one level. Also, within already the initial example, the bidirectionality is shown that if I click on any of the markers, then yeah, the value on the click marker is being written down here. So there are plenty of ways you can use this, and the most like sophisticated way we figured to use it is to build it into an explorer. Obviously, if there were more charts here, we could even call it a dashboard that again has the music revenue data. We like to stick to data sets because it's not the important bit here. And you have now a ton of other interactive elements around the screen, like you can change the time range, like what's visible on the screen. You can add or remove elements that are being shown, so like the music formats. You can adjust the value, the revenue value for inflation. You can switch from revenue to volume. You can stack it by format instead of year. You can actually add all the formats by a click of a button that are in the data, and you can sort them by value, and things like that, which is really nice. And it already, as you can imagine, so in order to just look at this data from a plethora of different angles and analyze it in a way, I didn't have to write a single line of Python. Somebody had to do it for me, who knows Python, who knows IPyVis, and who knows Streamlit. So people like you are still the key to get to this experience. But if I'm like a general business user and I have my data set, it can be obviously refreshable and whatnot. So Streamlit has a ton of connectors to different data warehouses and whatever. You can have real-time data coming in. You can have, as I said, more charts that are being like controlled via the same elements around the screen. So you can actually build interactive animated dashboards for business users by combining Streamlit and IPyVis for them. But there's also like one more thing, which is that we really feel that the current paradigm of data visualization is faulty. Currently, visualization is only an afterthought. People do analyze their data and only start visualizing when they have the insight. We think this is very inefficient, and if you can actually turn the analysis, so make the analysis visual, like this way, then basically creating a story, a presentation of your journey, of your insights, is a byproduct of the whole process. And this is the first example of this thing happening. So as you said, I mean, you saw me clicking around and generating different views of the same data set, but I also have this download story button here, which basically just downloads an HTML file on my computer. I'm going to save it wherever. I'm going to open it right away. And what you see here is an IPyVis story, or whatever, a story that has all the elements of a presentation and includes every step that I took using this Explorer. So basically, you know, this was the version when the moment when I filtered out CD, I switched to like inflation adjusted value, then to volume, then I switched the orientation to have the total number, and you know, I added all the other categories, music formats, and then I ordered them by value. So I have the presentation right in front of me without having to do anything about it. And just by taking a look at my data, this presentation is being generated in the background. This is far from perfect, far from a final end user tool, but it clearly shows the direction that we're working towards. And yeah, I want to finish up with, maybe again, if anybody has any questions or comments, I'm happy to hear it. And I'm just going to show you another example of why and how this whole thing can be useful. We think so. Hamid is raising his hands. Hamid, please speak up.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So I have the question, like just now you showed a template. What if we want to remove a step?
Yeah, you mean from the story that was generated?
Yeah.
No, that's a great question. This is only a tech demo at this point, and we definitely need to add the feature to edit these stories later on. It's part of it's on our roadmap, so to say. But it's a very spot on observation. Thanks a lot, Hamid.
You're welcome. So.
Right. Anybody with any questions? Okay, maybe the last example then, and I'm going to finish my presentation with that, is because at the beginning I told you that you know, we want to build this GUI for data, but I find it hard for people to understand and to have the sense of what we mean by that, which is totally okay. I mean, we are building something rather new, and yeah, it's always easier when you have the chance to take a look at it and have the chance to feel it. So this is just, again, a tech demo that we created. We call it the swiping data explorer or something like that. And so in order for you to understand what you're looking at, you have to understand that I have a touch-enabled laptop. Usually when I'm not doing a presentation like this, I use my phone to demo this to others. And let's imagine just a simple product that I uploaded a CSV file into with some values and categories in it. And I end up with an initial view, like an initial chart with 6 columns, as you can see here. But if I start swiping around the y-axis, and you can see my finger, that's the gray circle there, then what happens here is that I'm changing the value. I'm switching between the values on the y-axis. I can even scratch the animation. It's very intuitive to use it like this. So I'm just swiping through all the values that we have. There's an index that is 1 for each. So let's stop at value 1, for example. And I can also, if I swipe along the x-axis, I can just change the category that's on it. So basically, you know, this is like splitting the same value 1, either by this 4 categories or these 6, whatever. I can also add another category on the color if I do this, and I can change what's on color pretty easily by swiping through the legend. As you can see, it's 1 category each in this case, but and I can still just change the category on the x-axis the same way I did before. I can turn this into a scatter plot if I do this. So now it's a different chart, and I can even turn it into a bubble plot if I do this. So, and I have now 2 values on my 2 axes, and I can just swipe through it very intuitively and look for, you know, correlations or outliers. Yeah, I can change what's on the category like this. So there are plenty of pretty intuitive ways to look through and scroll through my data thanks to this thing. And it's not a product yet. It's really just a demo of what intuitive visual data analysis could mean using our generic data animation engine that we built. Yeah, and that's how I would want to round up my presentation. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm still all ears. I would love to have your questions. I listed, as I said, a lot of different links on the repo folder. There's just maybe one more thing I would like to ask you to do, for which I'm going to once again share my screen. So if you have the chance to go to this link, bit.ly/Vizzu-survey. There's like a very short, like 3-minute survey about what you just saw, about you. Like I would love to understand more about your work, about what you think about what we do, about how you think we can improve it, what you would want to use it for, how often do you present stories of data to non-data scientists and things like that. So if you have some time, just go to bit.ly/Vizzu-survey. That's the, yeah, I mean, I would definitely very much appreciate that. We have a Slack channel or a Slack workspace. The link is the invitation link is also, oh, thank you, Ron, is also on the repo folder. If the trolls who showed up earlier here will come up, we're just going to kick them out, so it's okay. And for everybody who's there to really collaborate and be part of this community and help us move forward, you're very welcome, and we'd love to have you there.
Thank you so much, Peter, for taking the time to share this with us today. I think this is really some exciting stuff. I know myself, I had an opportunity probably about 8 months ago to work with Streamlit for the first time. So that was interesting to see that integration as well. I think that comes in very handy as well.
Thanks. We actually have the same thing now available with Panel. I'm not sure if you're using it. It's a similar product coming from the Anaconda stable, and they have just released a major new upgrade with IPyVizu or with Vizzu integration in it. So you can basically do the same thing with Panel.
Okay, was not aware of that. I'll have to take a look at that as well. Does anybody have any questions before we wrap up the call?
Is anybody still in front of the screens? Can you show the hands up if you're still listening? Okay, Hamid is there. Well, yeah, Federica.
There we go. We got some thumbs up.
Remco.
Yes, there we
Great,
go.
great.
Good.
Federica even unmuted herself. I really appreciate that for a brief moment.
Okay.
All right.
And if there's anything you want to review and see, we went through all the examples. There was a lot of Python code on the screen at various points. This video will be presented. You'll be able to walk through and hit pause and take a look at it in more detail if you want to, do that, as well as go directly to the repositories out there on GitHub.
Absolutely, and there's like previous sort of similar presentations of me on YouTube that you can find already. So there was like a longer workshop type talk that I did at PyData Seattle a couple of months ago. So if you just search for PyData Seattle and Vizzu or IPyVizu, you will end up at that. There were no trolls, and I was more focused, I guess. It was earlier in the morning.
Yeah.
And not on a weekend day.
Sorry about that earlier on.
No, don't. I didn't want to complain about that.
So. No, I'm so used to closed meetings that I have everything enabled by default usually.
Oh yeah, sure. No, that's. I mean, yeah, it's a good learning, I guess. It's totally okay.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Peter. I look forward to digging into this myself, and I hope everybody enjoyed the presentation today.
Thank you for having me, Ron, Ricardo. It's been a pleasure. Thank you guys for listening. Just reach out to me. You saw my email as well on the screen. If you have anything to add, if you have a question, if you build something, we'd love to share it with the public. So thank you again. Take care.
Okay, take
Bye.
care.
Right.